So in a moment, later on, you're going to get to tell your stories, and we're going to do some exercises so you can also be able to introduce that. Any questions, comments? Okay. One of the things we do in the beginning is housekeeping details. We also ask people, because of this whole notion of people saying, well, why are we doing this? We do a little exercise where we ask people to show our hands. First of all, we talk about that's 3 hours, that they'll get a break. You need to understand where the bathrooms are so you can tell people. Most people will know, but we usually will tell them. And then also make sure that people have their handouts. Okay. The next thing is that we start to do a show of hands. And I ask, we do this for a few different reasons, because first of all, we want to see who has or hasn't knowledge about the program. So we ask people, have you ever attended a diversity workshop either here or anywhere? Anybody? Have you ever attended? Okay. Or have you ever attended a diversity workshop? I'm sorry. Have you ever attended or have you not ever attended are the questions. And usually in a room of 25 people, there's a whole bunch of people that have, and there are a whole bunch of people who haven't, okay? And I'll tell you why that's important in a moment. Okay, then we also ask people to rate their knowledge. So we want to just give you have 3 choices. You can either be advanced expert, intermediate, or beginner, however you want to define it. So we're going to just one vote, raise your hand. How many people think they're advanced in terms of their knowledge? How many people feel that they're kind of intermediate? And how many people think that they're at the beginner level? Okay? As you can see here, different people were at different levels.
How do you define advanced versus intermediate?
It's however you want to define it. That's what I'm saying. Okay, it's however you think about it. It's however you want to define it. If you think you know everything, you think you get, okay, so when I say to the advanced people, you'll see, I'll put this in there. So if you think you're advanced, I said, come on, I'll sit down, you can go and teach the class. That would be really advanced, right? But part of what we do this for is to be able to make this next statement that we're getting ready to make, which if you will see on page 20. Oh, and I also wanted to show you the way that the workbook is, the way that things are set up. There's the slide that's going to go with what you have to say. And wherever it says, page 20 is a good example. Page 20, you see there's a slide that says a show of hands, okay? And you see that I just went through that piece there. That's what you're going to say, okay? Now, there's a handout that is also supposed to go with what you say. You're referring to the handout. It will say, and we'll come to that in a moment, it will say, handouts refer to page. So you need to tell them on page 4 of your handouts or whatever that is, okay? So, where was I? Okay, so there's a reason why we ask people to do that. There's been a lot of people who said, why are you doing it at such a low level, or not a low level, but an introductory level? And there is a reason, because what we're trying to do is to create a common language, common understanding here at Leslie. And we use this exercise of people, so people around the room can see who's been to one, and there'll be some people that aren't. You'll have some people, a few people will say they're experts, and some people won't. And there are some people, quite honestly, that will say that they're beginners. And so you'll see on page 21, what we use this is to say, listen, if you are in the expert status, we're going to ask you to also contribute to the dialogue and to help us, with the information. This isn't just a one-way street. We want people to open up and ask questions. Because as you can see around the room, there are a lot of people who are not experts. And for some, this is the first time. So we've got lots of different experiential levels. So if you are more expert or intermediate, just consider this, if it seems basic in some spots, consider this a refresher course, because for some people, this is new information. And this is really what we were able to come up with to kind of set the tone, set the expectations, but also so people understand, why are we coming at this in the way? Because if we're going to have some common language, we all have to be at the same level to do it. Okay, any questions, comments, or whatever? Okay, at this point, okay. At this point in the program, we'll do the attendee introductions, and all we're asking, because again, this is sort of tight, we're only asking them to state their name, their school, division, department, and their title, nothing more. Not anything, I'm this, I'm willing to be that, that's all. Okay, because we just wanted people to at least open up, and also, I always use it as a training technique. I always try to, at least in the first part when I'm doing something, is to get people to say something. You know what I did with you guys today, okay? I got you to say something about expectations, and I think that, to me, it usually opens up for people because they're not as afraid to say something as they move forward. So that's what this is kind of doing, is we're not doing expectations there, okay? All right, the other thing that we want to do at the beginning, we just give some acknowledgements because we also want people to know how intense it was in terms of people throughout the university that were part of this. And so we talk about, the different people that were part of it. We also refer them, okay, this is the first time that you're really referring people to your handouts, which are in the back of your manual there. You want to take those out? It's in the very back of your manual.
Yeah, in the pocket.
And again, this is what will be out on the table for everyone, and by the way, the front cover is in color. Okay, this we kind of, try to save money for this session, but they're being printed up, the front cover in color, so it'll look really, really nice in terms of their handouts. But we ask people to turn so that they can really see the extent to which people, individuals, groups participated in the development of the program and some of the videos that we're doing. Okay, so you're basically just making sure that people know it wasn't just a few people, but quite a number of people. And we're also acknowledging those people. And we also want to give a special thanks to a few people. And those people are Mary Lubat, Jane Joyce, Susan Tice Garnier, and our video shooting. You'll see in a moment his work, John Delterio, and the people at MOOCAD actually helped us to create and shoot and edit these videos. Okay, so we just tell people to see the handout for a complete listing. All right. So we're moving at this point into the agenda for the program. And what we want to do is just briefly on page 4, point out to people that this is the agenda for the program. And do you already have that? Okay, I'm going to flip it back and forth to 2 things. Okay, but I'm working from the manual here, but also the handout will have the agenda as the next thing. Okay? Well, the look on your face, that's how it was when we were putting this together. It's like, okay, am I in the manual? Am I in this? But anyway, so here we just briefly talk to people about what the day is going to look like, that there's a part 1 overview, and in the part 1 overview, we've just gone through the introductions. In a moment, we're going to hear a welcome by the provost, and we're going to do some things around objectives and ground rules. Okay, in part 2 of the program, we're going to look at definitions and creating a common language. And part 3 of the program, we're going to look at a historical perspective of why race matters. And we have some videos that we're going to look at that were done by Dean Jack Gillette, and also look at the history of Leslie and the racial composition of the U.S. and the world, and how that relates to what we're doing here. Part 4, we're totally changing what we do, and we're looking more at a self-awareness piece, like how do I become more self-aware about diversity and inclusion and how it relates to me. And this is where there'll be the second trainer comes in, and then they do their introduction, and then there's an exercise that they do around their people's diversity awareness story. We talk about microaggressions, and also there's a case study that we look at that at this point of the program brings together all of the learning and also really focuses on microaggressions, and will lead us to also talking about how to have difficult conversations. Okay? If I'm going too fast, I'm kind of rushing here, but if I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down, all right? And then finally, the final portion of the program, we're looking at you're probably wondering what are the future initiatives. We talk a little bit about that. There's some resources for people to continue their learning, and there's also an action plan that we do as part of the program. Okay? So our program objective, this is where we cover the program objective, and that is the program objective, to make sure that everyone at the university has a deep contextual understanding of the benefits of genuine diversity and are working to make it a way of life and not just a program year. We also look at what the takeaways are for the session, and I'm not going to go through those, but basically this is what people are going to walk away with as a result of attending the session. And we established some ground rules that we have them to look at, including, such things as, speak for yourself and keep one conversation going, and you don't have to agree with people, but please try to at least be respectful and listen to what they say. So there's a page and a handout that you refer to them about what the ground rules are. Then we get into the portion of the program where we're looking at what are those key definitions, and that are allowing us to communicate, to think, and talk about diversity here at the university. The first definition is diversity, and I throw out, like, what is diversity? And people say, usually, differences. And then we talk about what kind of differences that we're talking about here at Lesley University. And what we did, this is another kind of controversial thing, you guys. I mean, as you know, most people will talk about race and ethnicity and gender, but some organizations include other things. So this is kind of the list, the laundry list of what people here have come up with in terms of what we're talking about when we're dealing with diversity. Catholic, for your information, people really wanted to make sure that people knew it was physical, cognitive, social, and emotional abilities that people are dealing with, okay? And also that diversity is achieved when people are valued, respected, and supported. This is a really key component in terms of the program. There's so many components of diversity, and quite honestly, each one could be, a year-long course, a semester's course that people will take. But we're going to concentrate specifically on these areas of diversity in the class. It's primarily on race and ethnicity, and gender identity and social justice. Okay, but in the future there will be other programs that will concentrate on some of the other areas of diversity, right? And also the whole focus of not just on diversity, but also people should also think about similarities and how that also works. We then, talk a little bit just about the definition of inclusion. And this is a great reference that a lot of the faculty use for inclusion, okay? So one of the things that we do is we have a video that we play of Provost Selassie welcoming people to the session.
Good afternoon. I'm Selassie Williams, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Lesley University. I'm here to talk to you this afternoon about one of the pressing issues that we're facing in American society today. It's the issue of diversity, race, multiculturalism, and inclusion. In recent years, we've seen a number of incidents of African American youth being shot by police officers in various towns around the country. This has outraged many people across the country and has raised the awareness among all of us about the issues of racism that still persist in this country. We at Lesley University have decided to take this issue head on. We've been prompted by many of the students who challenged the leadership at this campus to try to live up to its social justice mission. It is one of the things that we value most at this campus, one of the things that has been a part of our historical legacy, and one of the things that we want to continue on at this university for as long as possible. We've developed an inclusion plan, which has a number of components to it. One of those components being the training of faculty, staff, and students around issues of diversity and multiculturalism. One of the things that faculty and staff in particular need to be sensitive about when addressing diverse student populations or other populations from off campus. There will be training on how to identify microaggressions, how to minimize them, how to address them when we see them happening in the classroom or when we see them happening on campus. To say nothing of more egregious cases of racism, which we will not tolerate on the campus. So training is going to be one of the major points that we do. I'm also chairing, or co-chairing with Vivian Carlo, a faculty member in the Graduate School of Education, a task force on social justice in teaching and learning. That task force is taking on 3 different topics. One, trying to identify What activities are going on campus now? For instance, which classes provide students with an analysis of race, class, gender, sexism, and so forth? What kinds of programs are we offering to students on campus now as co-curricular activities to make them more aware of the issues? And what kinds of things are we doing with faculty in terms of faculty development? How are we helping faculty to become more sensitive to the needs of students in the classroom with diverse student populations? This will take place in different venues so that people have an opportunity to work with other colleagues from across this campus to address these critical issues. We're looking forward to working with you, our experts that come to the campus, and other speakers to make Lesley University the most inclusive and the most diverse campus that we can find. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there something that has to be adjusted?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. John was our partner in crime in doing this. Thank
The
you.
improvement is much better.
Thank you. Yeah, because we added a lot of imagery.
Yes.
John and I finally reached an agreement on that, and we added a lot of imagery and also, some things so that people aren't just listening, they also are focusing on things. So where do you see your video?
It was a,
Oh, no.
Okay, so I actually did that a little bit out of sequence. This actually goes earlier. I kind of jumped over it, sorry. It goes earlier. So basically, in the beginning, he opens it up so that people know what's happening. They have a sense of the future. They also know that this is a various thing from the administration. So where we were, actually, let me just...
Well, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Thank you for connecting back to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
Because that's what really started this.
Yeah.
And, this is like, adding that imagery makes this 1,000% better.
Good, thanks.
thanks, John.
Yeah, and I don't remember exactly what it looked like before, but I like the way it was laid out.
Yeah, I think the imagery, I mean, the vision that I had was more like a Ken Burns kind of thing in terms of looking at stuff. So people, rather than just kind of a didactic kind of, thing, so that at least they can be a little more engaged with it. Okay, so let me just get back on track here. So I went out of sequence here. So last week goes back on page 27, and then you go through the agenda. Then you go through the program objectives on page 32 and the takeaways. And then it goes through page, we went through the ground rules, and then it goes, okay, so at this point we would go through the common languages, and you saw the two definitions that we're going through here are diversity and inclusion. Okay, and there are many more definitions, and some people wanted a deep dive into the definitions and wanted even more, but we decided that we would give the basic definitions, and also you'll see in the appendix there's some other things, but also give people a reference, particularly faculty who really want a lot more in-depth knowledge about some of the definitions and terms. So there's a great reference that is there. So at this portion of the program, again, we've gone through diversity, we've gone through inclusion. We've told people that on page 44 that it was primarily concentrating on those areas in the workshop. And then we've gone through the definition of inclusion. And let's see, let me just catch up here. And similarities. And the rate reference. And then at this point, we want to just delve a little bit more into the notion of race and ethnicity, because even though diversity is a broad term, most people, when they think of diversity, they think of it in terms of race and ethnicity. So we're going to spend a little bit more time on that. And to do that, we've got some, we've reached out to the Lesley community and have some video people whose names we put up. Again, I just think it's really important for the people who have participated that their names are here, and they're already in the handout. And so we're going to explore some more definitions about race and ethnicity by watching this particular video. So this is the one that is literally the experts of Lesley talking about definitions of race and ethnicity and other definitions. Okay, Court? Yeah.
Martha, do you want the lights dimmed?
Tell me guys, should we dim the lights, or are you okay with them the way they are now?
Might be better for the captioning.
Yeah, do you want to do that? I think so, I think it is.
So if we're looking specifically at those terms of race and ethnicity, we know that traditionally, race has been defined as a group of people who have a certain physical characteristics, who may come from originally from a certain part of the world. We know that people at one time said that there were three races. There were Caucasian, Mongoloid, and Negroid. So Caucasian, translation white. Mongoloid, translation Indian, Asian, and the Negroid are people from sub-Sahara Africa. We also know that those definitions have come under a lot of fire, and that some people are saying, don't even think you should talk about race. But race also gets confused with ethnicity. Would anyone like to take a stab at what's the difference between race and ethnicity?
Well, the way I talk about it in my class is that race is usually what you said, we ascribe people who look a certain way or have certain characteristics of being part of a race. And most of us know by now that it's socially constructed because of how we want to differentiate between people. Ethnicity is usually what we think of in terms of broad cultural practices. So what are the dominant languages, what are the dominant food preferences, how people dress, how they behave, how they interact with one another when they're in public versus when they're at home. So group practices versus individual identifiers. I think those are two different ways to think about race.
An example of an ethnic group would be what?
Well, traditionally it would be Hispanics or Latinos. From our definition, that's actually the only real distinction that we make. Are you of Hispanic or Latino origin or not? But I think that if you look at what Brian is saying is that an ethnicity is defined by a group of people who have a certain type of culture. And ethnicities can actually span races. And I think that we spend more time limiting our definition of ethnicity than looking at the mix of people who we have around us.
I think a couple of other things too about the whole issue of race and ethnicity, and that is that people often interchange race and ethnicity. And so, for example, we use the term Hispanic or Latino, which in the Latin world and the Hispanic world, they actually don't use that term. And if you look at the pure definition of that, that is an ethnicity, it's not a race. But sometimes, as a matter of fact, Hispanics or Latinos can be any race. If you look at how we structure our U.S. Census, it is that way. The other point is that more and more in society, the lines of race are becoming blurred. And there are people who no longer want to just define themselves as one thing, that you're black or you're white. But they want to do all those things. Tiger Woods famously did that when he won the Masters. And people said, as we often do with people, like, well, what are you? If you really, quote unquote, inside, it's like, what are you? And he said, well, is there any black? He said, I am not black. And that is rude. That set people up. It's like, what are you talking about? You're not black. He's about my complexion. He said, I am not black. He said, I'm Cablinasian. Cablinasian. I'm Caucasian, I'm black, Indian, and Asian. So I am Cablinasian. Now, notice from Thailand, I am not just black. And the U.S. Census as of 2000 allows people to do that. You can check as many boxes as you want to in terms of what you are, and you can be more than one race. So I think it just points to that, particularly as we are looking at this issue, to put people just in one box or another, we understand the definitions, but also to see that it is evolving and that it is changing. Another subject that's evolving and changing is the whole notion around gender. And we have especially seen that in the last few years. The whole notion about what's the difference between gender and gender identification and sexual orientation, and what is this when people put on forms male, female, and other?
I see it as dominant group deciding whether the norms or behaviors of a subordinate group are okay, and labeling them deviant or different or wrong or etc. So I think that's what the issue is around gender and around sexual orientation.
Thank you.
I was going to add that when we see in the news a lot of the talk about gender identity and challenging of gender norms, one of the best things that I've seen come out of these discussions is the related topic of inclusion. So the language that people are using to talk about transgender or sexual orientation has been very sort of inclusive. It's sort of, we want to both educate people and not exclude them from the conversation, even though they might hold these sort of concepts in their mind. They're still willing to sort of reach out and bring that person into a more positive way of thinking of gender norms.
One takeaway I have from this dialogue today is understanding a little bit better about getting beyond just tolerance. I don't want to just tolerate. I want to be past tolerance, and that to me would be a goal for me. Is how can I help other people get beyond tolerance?
One of the things is like to really be aware of what people call themselves and what they want to be called. I think that's really important. Joshua, I think you wanted to get into the conversation.
So I think it's important to pull apart the concept of gender and sexual orientation, because much like race and ethnicity, I think they tend to overlap, or they don't need to overlap, or they shouldn't. But both of them are on a continuum. Gender being, like Brian brought up earlier, the idea of maleness and femaleness and where you lie on that continuum, or you lay on that continuum. Sexual orientation, who you are attracted to, both sexually and romantically.
And I can't believe we spent this entire time talking about diversity and inclusion, and I didn't even put on the table the role that international students, right? That as we're making sure we're having communities and critical mass of different constituencies, the perspectives that our international students can help bring to us is such an important piece of that. And so I think that as we have more and more international students in our classrooms, I think that will also strengthen our domestic students' ability to go out and be successful.
So important because, the world is smaller and, people go through their education today. The reality is that if you're going to make it, you're going to have to play in that world stage and understand that it may be very different than what you're accustomed to here. So very important. Thanks for that.
So at this point, we ask people, sorry. We asked people to comment a little bit about what they saw in terms of some of the common definitions we had around race and ethnicity, and also if there were some things that they found interesting or not interesting. Go ahead, Simon.
I have 4 things, and a couple of them are nitpicky. Correction again, I'm sorry. Brian didn't get an introductory placard when he first started talking, and later on when Josh mentioned his name was spelled wrong. It's Brian with a Y.
Yep.
More towards content, the intervening slides are really interesting. I'd like to see those a little longer because I couldn't follow what was going on.
Say that again now. Say the intervening means the ones that when they would pop up.
The pop-ups went by really fast. I couldn't track them. More content-wise, and more to your question, back on track. Sorry. Is there any conversation in this material about differentiating gender and sex?
This is where we go with that, and there's a handout in the back. Here's the issue, as you know. What we tried to do with this video was to get as many of the issues that people wanted to have come out, but have the experts say it rather than us, really talk about it. So there are tons of issues. I mean, the whole issue of sexual identification versus sexual orientation versus, all those things. So we just raised the surface of it.
Okay. If we're talking about gender identity, it's going to be a really significant one. I know that if students see this, that would be backlash right there for not addressing it.
Well, I think the biggest point that we have to make as facilitators is, again, is that we're just pointing out that there are differences and that we have resources available. And we can also point to the fact that the faculty have put together a guide on all the different gender identifications and orientations. And
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
yeah, the faculty put together a page that,
You should find that.
it's about 3 or 4 pages of all the different ways a person could potentially identify his or her gender. Of course, and that list is probably incomplete, but at least I think the point is we can point to the fact that Leslie recognizes that there's a spectrum, but we're looking at the totality of diversity and inclusion.
Right, no, absolutely, I know.
No, I hear what you're saying too, and that's, I think that's our challenge right now, is, I mean, it's a whole bunch of stuff in a short period of time, but that's.
I raised the question because I haven't been through this, and I wasn't sure if I was coming up later.
Yep. Basically, you'll see in some of the case studies and stuff, the issue does come up, but this is the only place where we talk about that, and then in the materials, in the resources, there's definitions from the Human Rights Campaign and stuff about what they constitute. Go ahead.
Yes, so the goal of the video is just to introduce those topics and conversations and acknowledge that differences exist and there's many conversations to be had. And then post the video, I don't know, I think you mentioned, is there time to unpack that and have those conversations or
we have it in terms of moving it out, and then when we get to the case study where we're bringing everything together, that's where people really have time for that. I sometimes feel like I wish that we covered less and had more time, but there were lots of factions that had to have things. The other thing, there's a controversy here too in terms of the whole issue of race, and there are a lot of people who do not want to use race at all. So we felt it important to just, again, to sort of bring up that this is like how people are defining it, but there are people that don't want that, and the whole Hispanic Latino issue, the transgender issue. So we try to get as many as possible into that, and also let the experts kind of say it rather than us preaching it. Okay. All right. So the next piece that goes into view is we talk about race and also the fact, again, how people define themselves. And in the resource guide section here, we just make note that if people are interested in terms of who is a part of what, racial group or ethnic group, they can read this particular article. And there also are other sites that they can go to on that. Okay. So we talk a little bit about the fact that race and education at Leslie, and the fact that this piece really gets at, people wanted us to kind of weave the whole notion, I'm sorry, let me go back. People wanted us to weave the whole notion about education and Leslie, and why does this stuff matter? Why does race matter? And so at this point, we have a video from Dean Jack Gillette, who really talks about the issue of why does race matter in education, so that people have a good sense of what that's about.
My name is Jack Gillette, and I'm the Dean of the Graduate School of Education, and I have been given an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the inclusion and diversity work we've been doing at the Graduate School of Education, and to talk about why I think it's an important part of the university as a whole. For us, it has a number of layers of responsibilities, quite frankly, here at the university. First, our responsibility as citizens in a diverse community. Obviously, we have an obligation to understand what it means to be a citizen of a diverse community. Beyond that, it also is local. What does it mean to be part of a community who has a diversity of perspectives and diversity of experiences? And what obligations and requirements does that create for us? And then finally, we're educators. We're the folks that put teachers in front of kids that in many, many cases look different than the teachers themselves. So we decided to take what we called Focus on Faculty Time. That is an hour and a half once a month before our all-school meeting to do a voluntary deep dive into what we call examining race. And really, we thought about balancing it in two specific ways. One is, people just are uncomfortable talking about race, so we needed to create multiple opportunities so that people could feel more comfortable dealing with uncomfortable topics. In some ways, to normalize talking about race, so it didn't seem like such a big deal, and it certainly didn't come up because of an emergency situation. But beyond just that sort of emotional work, it's really, really important to know stuff. Facts matter. Facts set the context for how races interact in this country. So just for example, the African American community is more hyper-segregated today than any community in America. While all groups have had their own periods of separation and segregation, the African American community, in terms of where it lives, is still hyper-segregated. That is 10 times more segregated than any other groups. And that matters for really important things because place really matters. I remember talking to a guy, I used to live in New Haven, and he was a worker back in the 1950s at a place called Olin, African-American guy, making back then about $8,000 a year, which was a lot of good money, had an opportunity to buy a house, as did his white coworker. The black coworker could only get a mortgage to buy a house about 10 blocks from the factory, a place called Newhall. The white worker was able to buy a house about 10 miles away in a place called Orange. And all of that was based on racial redlining. When both of them were retired, when I talked to them in 1980, the guy in Newhallville's house was worth $12,000. The guy whose house was in Orange was worth $250,000. Both played by the rules, both worked hard. One, because of segregation in place, had a great deal less money. So facts really matter. And I really like the definition of inclusion that I saw on the website, which talks about diversity as being asked to dance. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And I think that's a very different kind of sense of belonging. And I think that it's not pleasant when one is white and recognizes the elements of white privilege. But it's important. It's important to be able to think about how to use privilege in productive ways. It's not just something that is an onus. We all were born into this without having any sense of the history before. That we have no responsibility for. But in our lived environment, we have all the responsibility to take whatever that particular past history gave us, both the good and the bad, and to try to make it better.
So at this point, what people wanted to do is really get at the whole notion of the historical piece about race, but also why is it important that we're focusing in on this. And if you notice, he started really talking about some of the issues of social justice, and now we're getting ready to weave in, which is very, very important to people here in terms of social justice. And so we move into this piece here where we bring back the history of Leslie in terms of and race and education and how important it was, and the fact that Edith Leslie, who founded, her vision was to professionalize teacher education for young women who wanted to become kindergarten teachers. And of course, when she started the university, there was no TV, there were no income taxes, and women weren't even eligible to vote, so she couldn't even vote. But she believed in social justice. And what is social justice? And this is where we kind of try to, we need to give a definition, because again, a lot of people like assume that they know it, or they know it, but we wanted to say, so it requires that there's an equitable distribution or redistribution of power, of resources, of opportunities and responsibilities. And so the university was really founded upon that. But it also challenges the root causes of oppression and also injustice. And it may require that you demolish those institutions, the policies, the procedures, the laws, so that oppression and domination do not occur. So she believed in social justice and the importance of respect for individuals, which is also really important in terms of the concept of social justice. But social justice has evolved and the university has evolved, but it's still continuing within that tradition so that everyone can reach their full potential. And that's why diversity and inclusion is so important here at the university. We also know there's a concept that goes almost hand in hand with that, and that is the whole notion of intersectionality. And then we talk a little bit about the that diversity, a lot of times people that think of diversity as being a standalone unit, but really, there's an interconnectedness. So, for example, a person could be a female, a lesbian, an Asian, or an African American. So there are many components that you look at that. And also, it's a study of the overlapping social identities that are related to discrimination and domination and oppression. And that it occurs in this whole connectedness of the systems, whether it's laws or procedures or state governments or other political processes. And that's a really important piece, and that it also forms issues around privilege and oppression that are shaped through things like colonialism and imperialism and racism and homophobia. So understanding that is really, really key and important. Okay, question, let's stop here for a second. Questions, comments?
When you do this, or when we do this for students rather, that will be a really rich topic. We spend an entire class.
I know.
So that's good.
Exactly. And see, this is the piece. We had a lot of people that we were trying to, that everybody, you have to have this, you have to. It's almost like we have too much, but at the same time, we're just kind of whetting the appetite. But like when you whet the appetite, there's a whole other issues that do come up, and that's what we have to keep, I think, expressing to people. This is only to whet the appetite and get the issues out there. There are and will be other sessions that are going to, each of these can be a topic, a whole, like you said, a semester or more conversations, and people get their undergraduates, graduate degrees around these topics. Go ahead.
I mean, for the flow of the whole presentation and training, how much time is allotted here in this window on sectionality to engage in some Q&A?
It's like 2 minutes. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
This whole section that I'm doing now, it's an hour, I think it's an hour and 20 minutes or something. That's allotted for this. What page is that?
You said 2 minutes?
On page 6 and 7. Page 6 and 7, you get the timing for everything. Okay, so it's.
And so 2 minutes is everything after the Jack Gillette video up until this activity?
Say that again? Yeah. I mean, and again, like I said, this is our challenge, and people feel very, very strongly about keeping these things in, but I think it's going to be a challenge for us because it's a lot of information, that really deserves even more. They all deserve more conversation.
But I think acknowledging that up front, so that when you don't end up in a section out of the conversation and we're moving along, people feel like they need.
Yeah, and maybe. Again, I tried to say that with, that this is introductory and baseline or whatever, but I think we're going to have to say it even more. And you know what I mean? Because, I'm thinking I'm saying it like basic, it's, but it's like, that's not getting through. We've got to really keep saying it.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. Not just up front at the beginning, but
like
as you enter this section that you acknowledge.
I think that's really important for you, and we're going to make sure that happens in there.
Now, will there be some sort of workshop that will kind of touch those at like a deeper level later on?
Well, they're saying that again, this is like straight out the gate, and that part of the plan is through this inclusion committee and other committees to begin to do some more thinking about where you need to go next and have other conversations in different venues in terms of doing that. I mean, it's really important. To do that. Okay, at this point, what we do is we're really kind of do a quick quiz to test people's knowledge. We talk about race, but getting them to really understand what is the racial composition of the U.S. And to do this, the exercise is found in your handout, and I'm just going to walk you through it, but it is found on page. It's found on page 8, and we are in our workbook on page 63. And so what happens here is, this is a very quick exercise, but it's one that people seem to really like, is you put people into small groups, like their tables. Again, they're going to be a table set, so you don't have to move them. And you say to them, they literally have 5 minutes in their groups to guess what the racial composition is of the U.S., to use this paper to do so. So all the choices are included, all the choices are included here. You just don't know which ones, but they're all there and more. Okay, so you've got to guess real quickly, like what is the racial composition, and put the percentages in here. And it's meant to go real fast and to whatever. People actually have a lot of fun with this because what they do is they get in their small groups and they think about it. Okay, and I don't know, I'm kind of a trickster when I do like things like this. I like to like kind of tease people in terms of the education and thinking or whatever. And what the thing is about this is that I've done this for like hundreds and hundreds of audiences, and I will tell you about 98% of the audiences, maybe 99, get it wrong. Because they think that race is a whole thing in the United States. So I'm going to just point it out to you. So you do that, you put them in the groups, you know, they stay for 5 minutes, they have to elect a group spokesperson. And then we get them back together, and then you come up, it's group 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending upon how the groups. And so what you say is your group, you know, we're going to start from the bottom. What we do, and this is really key to processing this exercise, when your answers are on page 66, but when you process the exercise, you start from the bottom. And it's key that you do that because when you get to the ones that are at the top, people quite often think they're much more than they are, and people are absolutely shocked to understand what the racial composition is. So what you do is you ask group number 1, what is the percentage that you think are some other race alone? Okay, and they'll say it. And then if they get it right, you say, oh, you got it right or you got it wrong, you tell them what the answer is. So you get all the way up to the top. And anyway, it's a huge eye-opener for people in terms of race. But what we say is that we want you to understand that this is important. And if you look at, this is from the latest census, the last 2010 census, you have to go behind the numbers in terms of understanding what's happening with race in this country and also this university. And that is, if you look at the percentage of change, what you're going to find, if you go over to the far right, you're going to find that that while the white population is by far the largest population in the United States at 72.4%, what's happening is that there are 2 groups in particular, Asians and Hispanics/Latinos, who are growing at a much faster rate by way of that. And that's key and important because as we're looking at the demographic shifting in our country and also in this school, you're going to be seeing more of that over time. It's important for people to recognize that. So you go through and you process that, and also I often, you'll ask people like, well, was anything surprising to you? And people will really kind of speak up on that. Okay, and then the flip side of that is then you say, okay, so I have a quick exercise I want to do because, you know, we're also, you heard Lisa talk about international, the fact that, yes, diversity is about all these things, but also the international populations that we have coming here are very important. And so this quiz is really very quick. This is actually from, and this is a great resource for people. I don't know if you guys have used it or are aware, but it's a wonderful resource, the World of 100. And what it is, it's been done for like since the 1990s or something like that, they updated it. And it's, if the world only had 100 people in it, what would the world look like? Okay, so I've got a few things I'm going to point out to you. So if the world only had 100 people, what would be the number of people that would be from Asia? Would it be 9, 11, 15, or 16? Don't look at your answers yet, but what do you think? 9, 11, 15, or 16? Yes, it would be 16. How many people would be from Europe? 9, 11, 15, or 16? Quick question. Anybody? 9. 9, 15. 15? That's pretty close. It's 11. Okay. This would be the most widely spoken native language in this world of 100. Chinese, Spanish, English, or Arabic? Chinese. Most people say English. It is Chinese, man. Okay. Yep. And okay, how many people would be able to read or write? 83, 4, 13, or 7? 83, 4, 13, or 7? 13. It's actually 83. 83. The total number of people with a college education, would it be 1, 7, 10, or 55? 1, 7, 10, or 55. How many people would have an education in that 100 people?
College.
College.
7.
Oh, you're good. It is 7. Most people don't guess that. They say 1 or something, but it is 7. And then a few other things. How many people would have electricity? Would it be 10, 40, 78, or 95? 10, 40, 78, or 95? Have electricity.
78.
Yeah, 78. Cell phones would be used by this number of people, 1, 5, 75, or 85.
85.
1, 5,
75 or 85.
jump 5.
Yeah, 5 to 75, very jump.
It's 75. No.
Final answer?
5.
5. 75. And computers, see, you see how I also do it, you kind of like go along, people kind of like, 75, okay. And then, because you don't kind of like give them, or you kind of like say, whatever, and then it's kind of that. Okay, computers will be owned or shared by this number of people, 10, 22, 78, or 99. 10, 22, 78, or 99.
22.
It's actually 22. So then, I want to ask you a quick question as we're getting ready to summarize. What did you learn? What did you learn from these exercises? Look at the race and look at the world of 100. What did you learn? Anybody?
You get a little insight into the experiences, because you might, college education was low, it was like 7%. Computer access was really high on the end of the spectrum, so a lot of people necessarily aren't going to school but have access to technologies and different things.
Exactly.
But it varies, so if you look at the comparisons, different questions you ask.
What about how the world looks like versus how the U.S. looks? So in the U.S., we know that 72.4% of people are Caucasian people. But in the world, the vast majority of people are who? The Asian people, okay? And they're not speaking English. They're speaking Mandarin or Cantonese, okay? What else? Anything else that from this piece?
You're representing a small portion of the world.
We represent a very small portion of the world, but the world is coming to us here at Wesleyan also. We're seeing more international students, and based upon these statistics, you're going to see more. So there's just a quick summary, and you'll see down here. So we just want to summarize what we've learned today by this. So we've learned for the quiz how things are different in the world versus how they might be here in this country. Also, what the population is growing significantly, and some of the populations that we may have to adapt to more are Hispanic, Latino, Asian populations, which we may, don't see as much here, but are going to see more. Also, our student population is going to be more international probably, so we've got to think about that from diversity and inclusion. And as we become more diverse, that we come from a tradition of social justice, and we're trying to continue that tradition, but also in a way that may be a little different than what Edith Leslie had done. Okay, so that summarizes the first thing. At this point, people get a 10-minute break, and then they come back, and then we go to part 2 of our training. Okay, and whoever's doing the first part is exhausted and ready for the second person to come and do their training. All right, questions, comments?
We taking a 10-minute break?
We are. No, you're going to sit here. No. We are going to take a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we're actually going to start on part 2. And part 2, and this is going to be our, we're right actually on schedule for this session. This is where we're going to start to have you think about your personal diversity awareness story. Okay, so I'll tell you about that when we get back first. So everybody would look at their watches or PDAs or whatever you have to keep track of time, and be back in